Welcome to CCI Toronto's Condo Convos, casual chats about important condominium topics. Today's topic is sustainable communities. Listen in and you'll be on your way to achieving financial and social success. We thank First Service Residential, the sponsor for today's session. The topic for sustainability is a very broad and expanding topic. To help us today, I have Justin McLarty with Miller Thompson, and I have Sunil Gupta with First Service Residential. I'm Nancy Longera with Morrison Hirschfield. So Sunil, the topic of sustainability is quite broad. What do you think about sustainability? What's your take on it?
Yeah, not only is it broad, but it's also expanding. And one of the things that I'm really enjoying is to see the diversity of engagement in it. We've got a building science expert, we've got a lawyer on the panel, and I'm with a property management company. And 5 years ago, we may not have had this discussion. So sustainability, I mean, sometimes it depends as to who's the person trying to define it. So a residency's sustainability, different than a utility does, different than a city, different than the service provider. When we speak to condo boards about sustainability, we're very clear as to trying to figure out what it means for the corporation. And generally what we have found is boards are very interested in sustainability because it helps manage the affordability of the community, as utilities represent 30 to 40% of a condo budget. Managing sustainability helps manage the finances. Corporations also care about sustainability because it speaks to the functionality of the equipment, the HVAC, making sure the users and the occupants are warm when it's cold outside, they're cool when it's hot outside, they're dry when it's wet outside, and even kind of gets into things such as the elevators working well and so on and so forth. The other element that's also quite important is the reputation of the community. Nobody wants to live in a building that has a lot of problems with the HVAC or the elevators. Investors want to invest in a community that is sustainable. Residents want to live in a community that is sustainable. So it's a broad topic with quite a bit of engagements in the community.
Yeah, same for me. In my background as a building science engineer, it's really always been about durability, ease of maintenance, just easy maintenance. On a personal level, it's, can I live here? Can I continue to live like this? Is this space a good space for me? That's usually what comes to my mind. Justin, what about you? What's your take on sustainability? And what kind of an impact do you think condos can have?
Yeah, so for me, it's less of a technical, maybe more elementary, reduce, reuse, recycle. Just making sure that resources are being used efficiently and they're enough to continue on into the future. I think, though, there's definitely a large impact, almost from a public policy perspective. We do know that now over 25% of all dwellings in the City of Toronto are condominium units. And for instance, last year, over 85% of all new construction for residential sector were high-rise multi-unit residential.
Right. So with these stats, I mean, we're going to have newer condos, older condos, high rises, low rises. Sunil, where do you think newer condos? What kind of situations are they dealing with?
Yeah, so newer condos always represent a bit of an extra challenge in the sense that there isn't really an established funding to invest in sustainability measures. Perhaps you have new occupants that are still trying to understand the community. So it's and oftentimes if things aren't addressed, you'll find a little bit more premature equipment failure, which leads to a lot more expensive repairs. So our approach has been with new communities is that we look to operational improvements. We will look at the operations staff, we'll look at the maintenance contractors to help get the equipment operating as efficiently. These are often low-cost, no-cost measures, which they're not always commissioned or set up adequately to meet the needs of the community. So to us, that's a pretty simple place to start. And then when the decision is there to invest in more expensive measures, that's the opportunity that we have then.
So when I think of existing buildings and then planning for repairs, sometimes they're looking at something that's in their reserve fund study and they're thinking, can we fold in something that's a green initiative, can become more efficient? Maybe it's not in the reserve fund study. Maybe they're looking at the buildings around them. They were the only building there in the beginning, and now there's a bunch of other more modern condos around them, and they want to do something to keep up. Justin, what should condos consider as they're trying to plan for repairs, whether they're in the reserve fund study or not?
Yeah, so there's really two different processes that they're going to have to follow. The first will be if the project could be characterized as a major repair or replacement. The other process, which would be under Section 97 of the Act, would be if the project would be characterized as an addition, alteration, or improvement, which we'll just call changes today. In which case, you can't use the reserve fund for that, and you may actually need to get the owner's involvement in that project.
Right. There's one project that I find is a hot topic with clients when I meet with them, and it's that of window replacement. It's a hot topic because it's an expensive topic. Mm-hmm. It's a disruptive topic for when they get onto that work. I do get a lot of questions about if we're upgrading the windows, is this a Section 97 issue? Other things that happen is, they've debated the issue for years. Are we going to refurbish? Are we going to replace? And they talk a lot about the energy part of it. But one thing, we bring up is that, your payback is really not great just on the window replacement. You wouldn't do it just to replace, just for energy purposes. Things that they may not think about is their actual thermal comfort. The glare, the sun, the heat gain when they're in a space. The other one that we hear more about is noise. Leaky windows, if they leak air, they leak noise. And these are things that they're dealing with. So again, if we're talking about a sustainable community, I like for our clients to think about a sustainable space. Can I live here? Am I comfortable? But sometimes the windows is a gray area for Section 97 because they're wondering about the energy efficiency piece of it. Or using more modern materials. Yeah. Justin, do you come across that? Yeah.
So luckily the Act itself does speak to that. It does say that you can use materials that are reasonably in quality to the original. Also, you can take into account current construction standards. So definitely that single pane window in the condo that was built 30 years ago, you don't have to put single windows back in order for it to be a major repair or replacement. So you can take a look at what is the current industry standard. So if we're looking at something like anti-glare, for example, the City of Toronto will have new requirements on anti-glare on the windows to prevent birds from flying into them. So if that's a new construction standard in the city, that's somewhere where you can look to your engineer and say, this is what the current construction standard is. And in our opinion, it's a major repair or replacement.
Great. And so, Sunil, my background is more on windows, building envelope. What are some other types of projects that?
Yeah, so the projects and what we try always emphasizing to the boards is you're already paying for it. You're paying it to the utility as opposed to, investing in yourself. So we see the energy projects as a way for corporations to invest in themselves. Most of the projects that we deal with are usually less than a 2-year payback, 3-year payback, and those are very attractive. Some of it is changes in technology. So we've got LED lighting now. So we're even going through a second generation of LED lighting, LED to LED. We look at optimizing pumps and fans and ventilation, and those are always very attractive. And we also look to optimize our central chiller and boiler plants. There's always oversizing in some ways, so it gives us that opportunity to try and take care of some operational issues that if we don't find a way to have these things operate at an efficient level, it's going to prematurely fail. So in a way, it is a great investment in the community. But then, we also do get into the behavioral aspects of the users as well as the site staff. And we're also looking to find ways to operationally improve things within our community.
So there's some things are low cost or no cost. Other things are going to be much larger cost. I've seen it often, Justin, where they don't have the money right now. They've asked about, can we get a loan?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So borrowing definitely is an option, and increasingly lenders are more comfortable and familiar with lending to condominiums. One thing though, when you are planning out the timeline for your project, in most cases now, you will need to pass a bylaw to approve that borrowing, and you're going to need a majority of the owners to vote in favor of it. In the future, any kind of borrowing, you're actually going to need to pass that bylaw. So when you are planning your project timelines, that's one of the key pieces that you're going to need to take into account during that process.
And the other area of borrowing is also a lot of vendors. They also provide financing for the equipment as well. And it's what we've seen in many cases. It's no different whether it's an independent lender versus the vendor who's also putting forth, I guess, no payments for the first 6 months or a year or for until the project's paid for. So that's one of the other options that are out there.
So Sunil, I'm curious, so your title, your role is Senior Director, Energy and Sustainability. What do you see in the future for condos with respect to sustainability? Yeah,
so I think there's a whole community that's based around, if you want to call it, some of it's around the engineering and the sustainability aspects of it. And they've almost developed a whole new language on itself, embodied carbon, the energy water reporting benchmarking. They've, look at near net zero, LEED certification. And that industry will kind of continue to get a little bit more involved and entrenched. But from a user's perspective, from the board's perspective, I think it's a higher quality of life that we're going to expect seeing in the future. I think we've gotten fairly good at building newer condos, and we'll continue to go better with that. But it's now really the opportunities are in that retrofit space, right? Existing buildings. How do we take use of technology and oversizing, right sizing to without the occupant really necessarily being impacted one way or the other, perhaps find ways of improving services, person being able to order an Uber from their space seamlessly, build in ways to rent the amenities and other things that make life easier in a condo.
So what about electric vehicle charging stations? We're hearing
Yeah,
less about that. It seems like we're hearing a little bit less about that now.
That was a big trend last year. It's smoothened out a little bit. Part of it is there's also been a lot of installation. I think everybody felt that there was a real push to get an electric vehicle charging station for the fear of missing out. But at the same time, I advise the boards, every community is going to be different in how they want to allow owners to be able to own electric vehicles, right? There's always the option of making it an amenity, something that all the users, all the occupants have the ability to use, or there's the opportunity to have it in an individual's parking space, right? So both options need to be considered in a community's plan. I always ask the boards to start off with a survey, perhaps, to get what's the engagement and expectation. I drive an electric vehicle, and I can't even charge at my house. I usually find the public charging spaces, and that seems to work for me. It may not work for everybody in a condo as well, but you'll find a lot of people, it does actually represent an ability to charge. The way to approach electric charging for a lot of corporations is they're trying to figure out a way that allows some level of fairness to charging accessibility. The other thing that they're trying to figure out is how to make this, I guess, the lowest cost of ownership, so looking at the overall lifetime, and as well as minimize the effort that's required to maintain the EV charging station. I don't think any board wants to get into the situation that every board meeting starts off, the first hour is around the grievances of electric vehicle charging. And most boards are figuring their way through it, some a little bit more aggressively, and some taking a let's wait and see. We don't want to get stuck with an iPhone 3 approach, yeah.
So, you know, this is probably not an item that was in their reserve fund study. How would they deal with that?
Yeah, well, luckily, installing electric charging stations is one of the few green initiatives that made its way into the new act. So they did change the process specifically to install these charging stations, both if the corporation wants to install it or if an individual unit owner wants to. So now if the corporation itself wants to make the installation, and the total cost is less than 10% of the annual budget, basically the corporation just needs to send a notice to all of the owners, letting them know what they're going to do, and then they can proceed with the installation. If it's going to cost more than 10% of the annual common expenses, again, a notice has to be sent out, and the owners can requisition a meeting to have a vote. But in this case, unlike Section 97, where if it's over 10%, you would need 2/3 of all owners to vote in favor of the change. Now at this meeting, the owners would actually have to vote against it. So they've really tried to streamline the process to make it as easy as possible for the corporation to install these charging stations. If a unit owner wants to install a charging station in their own parking unit, the corporation actually has to have a reason to say no. And they're going to need a professional opinion saying that this installation will either contravene the act itself, affect the structural integrity of the building, or the electrical safety code. So really these changes to the act were made with a view to making it very easy to say yes to install the charging stations and rather difficult to say no to letting it go forward.
So some of the systems or some of the issues that you talked about, Sunil, really are more applicable to high-rise buildings. What about low-rises and townhouses? What can they do?
Yeah, low-rises and stacked townhouses and townhouse communities, they're definitely horizontal communities versus vertical communities, and they offer different challenges, but in a way there is sort of a level of sustainability that is built into them. They're usually limited in sort of common area equipment. There's less equipment that runs 24/7. So from that perspective, overall, the community is, from an energy, perhaps not as energy intensive as the vertical communities that we see. But their approach to sustainability will perhaps be different. Some of these communities might be closer to a wilderness area, so landscaping, pesticides, how they treat waste is something of consideration. They could have garages, and garages are always a bit of a challenge in terms of maintaining longevity in them. There's 24/7 lights in there. And water. If we can find behavioral things to kind of help these communities, that's what we try and practice as well. So while our focus is largely on the vertical communities, because that's really where a lot of impact can take place, there's still certain things that we can look at in townhouses and stacked townhouses as well.
Thanks. So obviously a lot of different topics. It's very broad, it's expanding. In another 1, 2, 3 years, we may have a whole bunch of different topics in front of us again as we talk about sustainability in our condominium corporations. So I'd like to thank Justin and Sunil today. Thanks very much. We hope you enjoyed this.